Introduction. I am a researcher who particularly studies the laws of the spiritual world that spread widely in the first half of the 20th century. Of course, Rudolf Steiner is also one of the important figures in my research. In particular, I have been studying for over 20 years the second coming of Christ prophesied by Rudolf Steiner and the Maitreya Bodhisattva. And among the many mystics active at that time around the world, I identified an initiate who met the conditions of the Maitreya Bodhisattva as shown by Steiner. That was a Japanese, Onisaburo Deguchi. It was a very fortunate thing for me, a Japanese studying Rudolf Steiner, to notice this. Originally, from the time I started studying anthroposophy, I had noticed that there were many points of spiritual recognition in common between Steiner and Onisaburo. However, there were many difficulties until I noticed the possibility that the Maitreya Bodhisattva that anthroposophists were looking for at that time might have been Onisaburo Deguchi, collected clear evidence, and gained conviction. This is because I had to read and deeply understand the vast literature left by the two geniuses. Of course, I also understand Steiner's laws of reincarnation and karma. Therefore, if I were to lie, I am fully aware of the risk of carrying that mistake into the astral world and the next life. For this reason, I myself had stronger doubts than anyone else about whether Onisaburo Deguchi is really the Maitreya Bodhisattva, and I was forced to endure great tension and patience until I could dispel them, which took many years. Through this process, I also came to understand the reason why the Anthroposophical Society has not been able to identify the New Essenes, or the Maitreya Bodhisattva, even 100 years after Steiner's death. In the first video, I decided to explain in bullet points the reason why Maitreya Bodhisattva, which Steiner was talking about, could not be identified for 100 years. And in the second and third articles, I will introduce some particularly important points for those who already understand anthroposophy. The series of videos Steiner Code that are already public were originally created for Japanese people who do not know Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy. In other words, it is an introductory edition. Therefore, in order to accurately convey the words of Steiner and Onisaburo, I am conscious of using many quotations. However, in the 16th and 17th episodes, evidence of Christ's second coming is presented from the history of the material world. Furthermore, episode 15 also presents perceptions of the second coming of Christ by mystics other than Steiner. It is particularly noteworthy that the contents of George Vale Owen's books are in agreement with the testimonies of Steiner and Onisaburo in many respects. I believe that these three videos will supplement the above series on the Steiner Code and lead to a further and deeper understanding. The circumstances leading to the publication of my personal research. I have deepened my understanding of reincarnation and karma not only through anthroposophy but also through many other texts. That's why I'm afraid to speak falsehoods. Therefore, due to this fear, it was possible for me to choose to die without telling anyone about the results of my research. However, suppose it was found after my death that my research was true. In that case, I would undoubtedly leave deep and significant regrets after death for not having spoken anything due to fear during my lifetime. And there should be a risk of people appearing on earth who speak of false Christs and false Maitreya Bodhisattvas, because I did not prove that Steiner's recognition is true. Also, I had the following image. Suppose I were a spiritualist and said, I was told directly by Christ and Maitreya Bodhisattva in the etheric realm who Maitreya Bodhisattva was at that time. Suppose I had said. Then who or how many people would believe it by my words? To judge whether the story is true or false and to draw a conclusion, in the end, there is a need to show clear reasons and evidence. Through such circumstances, I came to the following conclusion. Suppose the results of the research I speak of were true. However, those who cannot understand its logic or strongly doubt it should not believe it. After all, those who judge it to be true are only people who can understand the meaning of my story, and it is only possible to reach a conviction by their own thinking ability. If the results of the research I speak of were misunderstandings, they would be corrected by someone who knows another truth. Then, by understanding and acknowledging that it is a misunderstanding, my error will be corrected, and I will progress spiritually. Then, by apologizing for the mistake in the research, correcting it, announcing a new truth, and making amends for the mistake, I will contribute to progress. Therefore, first of all, I would like you to understand that I am publishing the content of my research on the premise of such circumstances. Let's begin with the consideration of the reasons. For those who can understand both Rudolf Steiner and Onisaburo Deguchi, finding the reasons is relatively easy. The people of the Oomoto sect, in the historical facts of Oomoto, called Onisaburo Deguchi Maitreya-sama, and were convinced that he was Maitreya Bodhisattva. Therefore, there was no need to search for evidence that Onisaburo Deguchi was Maitreya Bodhisattva in foreign literature. Onisaburo Deguchi spoke of the teachings of Shinto, Buddhism, and Christianity. However, the great Japanese Empire at the time, due to a global war, was unifying the will of the Japanese people and excluding foreign thoughts and religions. Therefore, Oomoto tended to be spoken of as Shinto. Onisaburo Deguchi left many words about Christ. However, the Japanese at the time did not have an environment where they could learn Western mysticism and anthroposophy. Therefore, it was difficult to clearly understand the spiritual connection between Christ and Maitreya Bodhisattva. In Japan at that time, there were few people who believed that the second coming of Christ would occur. Therefore, they could not notice the relationship between the prophecy of the second coming in the Bible, the second Oomoto incident, and the Second World War. Onisaburo Deguchi argued that Kunitokotachi no Mikoto of Japanese mythology is the same god as Jehovah and Zeus. Therefore, Christ as the solar spirit in anthroposophy, or Jehovah, Zeus, Osiris, has been called Kunitokotachi no Mikoto in Shinto and has been worshipped in Oomoto. Steiner spoke of Christ as Logos and Ether of Sound, and Onisaburo Deguchi referred to it as Christ's Pearl, Spiritual Word, and Secret of the Single Wheel. What Steiner spoke of as the power of words of Maitreya Bodhisattva, Onisaburo Deguchi spoke of it as the baptism of fire by Susanoo no Mikoto. Onisaburo Deguchi's study of spiritual words interprets Japanese spiritually by interpreting each of the 50 sounds, which are combinations of 5 vowels and 10 consonants in Japanese. This is a very difficult logic for Japanese people, and even if they could understand it, very few people could apply it, and it was extremely difficult to explain it in a foreign language using the alphabet. The spirit generally recognized as Christ in the West is recognized in Japanese mythology as Amaterasu Mikami, an avatar of Kunitokotachi no Mikoto. The evidence for this can be found in many common points in spiritual exploration, but it cannot be known in general religions. The Maitreya Bodhisattva of Buddhism has been spoken of as Susanoo no Mikoto in Shinto in Oomoto. This is partly because Japan at that time had a policy of unifying the Buddha of Buddhism with the gods of Shinto. Similarly, the spiritual event of the Second Coming of Christ in the West has been recognized in Japan since ancient times as the opening of the heavenly rock door. In fact, Onisaburo Deguchi has written in the Spiritual World Story that the second coming of the Messiah, the descent of Maitreya, and the opening of the heavenly rock door all mean the same thing. In anthroposophy, the Holy Spirit of the West is spoken of as the collective of bodhisattvas in Buddhism. Similarly, Onisaburo Deguchi spoke of bodhisattvas and saints as avatars of Susanoo no Mikoto. In this way, all the spiritual phenomena recognized by Onisaburo Deguchi have been replaced with the words of Shinto in Japan and have been worshipped in Oomoto. Therefore, it has been extremely difficult for mystics from other countries to discover Christ. Thus, for 100 years, we have felt that Onisaburo Deguchi of Oomoto is unrelated to anthroposophy. Therefore, from exactly the same perspective, the people of Oomoto have felt that Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy is completely unrelated. And there was another major factor at work. This was because Rudolf Steiner was so great in the West. Likewise, Onisaburo Deguchi was too great in Japan. When one sees someone who is too great, one does not try to find another great person. Above all, both of them spoke and wrote so much spiritual awareness that it was impossible to understand either one of them. Therefore, it is a daunting task just to understand either one of them. Thus, no one understood both Steiner and Onisaburo. In Japan, the translation of Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy books and their general distribution in bookstores began from the mid-1980s, and the types of translated books increased from the mid-1990s to around 2000. On the other hand, Onisaburo Deguchi's spiritual world story became widely known to the public in magazines and other media around 1990. It is believed that the main reason for this was that Onisaburo Deguchi's books had been published for 50 years and the copyright had expired. In other words, before 1990, there should have been very few people in Japan who were researching both at the same time. I think I first learned about Onisaburo Deguchi's books around 1993, and the first time I read Steiner's book Theosophy of the Rosicrucian World was around 2001. And I remember that I discovered many common recognitions between the two around 2003. In this way, due to physical circumstances, we did not have an environment where we could identify the Maitreya Bodhisattva of anthroposophy for 100 years. Furthermore, Western anthroposophists, being experts in Rudolf Steiner, are not very familiar with Japanese culture and spirituality. Eastern Shintoists, being experts in Onisaburo Deguchi, are not very familiar with Western mysticism and anthroposophy. Many people who study anthroposophy deepen their understanding of God from the wisdom of the Bible. However, there should be few people who know Japanese Shinto. Japanese Shintoists interpret God from the understanding of Shinto myths and ancient documents. However, there should be few people who understand the Christ of mysticism. Therefore, we need to respect Steiner and Onisaburo as extremely great individuals who spoke of wisdom from a higher dimension than ourselves. It is difficult for experts who cannot understand both at the same time to truly discover the connection between Rudolf Steiner and Onisaburo Deguchi. If you do not know both, it should be impossible to combine Christian Rosenkreuz and Maitreya Bodhisattva as Steiner spoke, or to merge the flow of the East and the West. Westerners who do not try to understand Japanese culture and belittle it will distance themselves from the Eastern Maitreya Bodhisattva. Similarly, Japanese people who do not try to understand Western culture and belittle it will distance themselves from the Western Christ. The holy word, love your enemies, should give the power to discover Christ in Japan and the power to discover Maitreya Bodhisattva in the West. Just as Easterners who do not know anthroposophy have no right to deny the recognition of Rudolf Steiner, Westerners who do not know the Sutras of Oomoto have no right to deny the recognition of Onisaburo Deguchi. It is a matter of course. If a Japanese-made video about Rudolf Steiner is prejudiced, saying, "Why do I, a Westerner, have to learn the recognition of anthroposophy that has spread from Europe to the world from the Japanese?" It's upside down. It's ridiculous. It may be difficult for that person to understand Maitreya Bodhisattva in this world. It is reported that Rudolf Steiner, at the age of 21, met an outstanding, spiritual guide unknown to the world through Mr. Kogutsky, and answered Steiner's questions as follows: "If you want to defeat your enemy, start by understanding him. Only when you hide in the dragon's bosom will you become a victor over the dragon." Many people should know this. Similarly, the only people who should be able to determine the truth or falsehood of Onisaburo Deguchi are those who understand Onisaburo Deguchi's spiritual world story and Neo Deguchi's Oomoto oracle. I feel it is important to change the strength to strongly doubt whether Onisaburo Deguchi is Maitreya Bodhisattva into the power to understand Onisaburo Deguchi. I myself have been researching with such consciousness for over 20 years. Rudolf Steiner concluded his lecture on Maitreya Bodhisattva with the following words: "Anthroposophy is unrelated to authoritative faith. I am only speaking about what I could clarify as a result of my own spiritual quest. I would like you to confirm the content of my talk not because I said it, but by comparing it with history and especially your own experience. In an age of knowledge like today, it is not appropriate to appeal to faith. I would like you to scrutinize my talk through your intellectual thinking ability. Once again, I repeat, in the 20th century, the Bodhisattva does not let someone tell that he is the future Maitreya Buddha, but stands before the world with the power of his own words. If we faithfully follow what Steiner is saying, we think that, confirming by comparing with history and especially our own experience, is the true attitude as an anthroposophist. Therefore, people who only strongly doubt new discoveries, do not try to know anything, and do not try to confirm for themselves, even if they are anthroposophists, will postpone the judgment of approval or disapproval forever. Such people cannot believe in their own power until the day when some famous anthroposophist acknowledges Onisaburo Deguchi. I can assure you that what I will reveal next time can only be understood by those with such an attitude. It also means that it is a spiritual wisdom that has remained so veiled in the West and in the East. This time, we have been examining the reasons why the Maitreya Bodhisattva in Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy has not been discovered for 100 years. Of course, this is based on the premise that Onisaburo Deguchi, who was worshipped as the Maitreya Bodhisattva in the Oomoto sect in Japan in the 19th century, is the Maitreya Bodhisattva prophesied by Steiner. Therefore, in the next episode, I would like to deepen my understanding of Onisaburo Deguchi's spiritual recognition through the wisdom of ancient Egyptian initiation in anthroposophy. This is because it is easier for Westerners to understand the spirituality of Onisaburo Deguchi through the work of Osiris, Isis, and Horus in anthroposophy, leading to an understanding of Christ. And in the following third episode, we will deepen our understanding of the fig tree recorded in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Buddhist scriptures, and the Bible through anthroposophy. By doing so, I would like to clarify the meaning of the fig that Onisaburo Deguchi spoke of. Thank you for watching until the end. Please join us again next time.